Hello everyone, my name is Nicole and welcome to this channel. I've been enjoying the newborn bubble, so I took the past 2 weeks off and today we're back and creating. Around the end of my pregnancy, I did a lot of baking to try and prepare for when baby's here, so our freezer can be well stocked with bread. So I decided to film a week of baking all kinds of bread with my sourdough starter. I used to only make loaf with my starter, and it wasn't until a few months ago when I decided to stop using commercial yeast and just make everything with my sourdough starter. Here I'm making sourdough bagels. I will link all the recipes I followed down below. They're mostly from Farmhouse on Boone and Little Spoon Farm. To this, I added half a cup of bubbly starter, 1 cup water, 2 tablespoons of honey, 2 teaspoons salt, and 4 cups of bread flour. And I just let the mixer knead the dough. I'm then going to let it sit here in my warm spot overnight, and the next day I weight it so I can properly divide it into equal sizes. I struggle a lot with eyeballing things, so I like to always be specific and measure everything, otherwise it doesn't turn out well. I then roll the dough into, I think, 8 balls and poke holes in them. Poking holes in the bagel dough is definitely my favorite step. Anyway, as I was saying, now I make everything with my sourdough starter. I've read the benefits of using sourdough, and honestly, everything just tastes so much better when it's made with sourdough starter. So I try to make everything bread-wise or just baking-wise with sourdough now. I've actually doubled the amount of starter I feed, so I can make more with my starter every time I feed it, and eventually I'm gonna triple it and buy a really big jug to put it in. Now that the bagels are shaped and they've got their holes, I'm putting them again in my warm spot and letting them rise for another hour, I think. After an hour, I go ahead and bring a large pot of water to a boil, and once that's boiling, I added baking soda and brown sugar to that water. I then gently add the bagels to the water. I don't overcrowd it, so I do 3 at a time. I used to do 2 at a time, but then now that I've made bagels so many times, I'm kind of like, I've gotten the hang of it, so I've started doing 3 at a time. I do 1 minute for each side. I do time it because, like I said, I like things very specific. So I do time exactly 1 minute or 2 minutes, and then I flip it to the other way. I found the chopstick hack somewhere, and it has like changed my bagel game, because often the holes just shrinks, and the bagels just get bigger and then the holes just disappear. So I do the chopstick method so that the hole doesn't disappear, and then right after boiling and putting my topping on, I put it in the oven and I bake it at 425 Fahrenheit for about 20 to 25 minutes, and then we enjoy the bagels. So here I'm making everybody breakfast. I added cream cheese, avocado, I think cucumber, and salt and pepper on that, and an egg, obviously. And we had a very, very yummy breakfast that day with our fresh bagels. The next morning, I did pizza dough because I planned to make pizza that night, and to this I added half a cup of starter, 4 cups flour, 1.5 cups water, 2 teaspoons of salt, and 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I added that to my stand mixer and I let it do the job like always. I do this about 10 minutes, sometimes 20. It really just depends on the feel of the dough. It actually took me so long just to get this video out because we have been at the hospital. We've moved out of this house that I'm filming this video in. So yeah, this took me a long time, and I'm watching this, I'm like, I don't even live in that house anymore, but this video is coming out this week. Anyway, to the dough, I let that rise again, and then I think I do that about 8 hours at room temperature in my usual warm spot. And this day, actually, I remember I accidentally let it rise for too long because we went out and we ended up coming home late. So the dough was a little bit sticky, but it still worked out. We still had yummy pizza. Anyway, here I am rolling this into a pizza dough, adding my toppings, adding my sauce, I think I made Hawaiian this day, so adding my cheese, my ham, and my pineapples. And then I put this in the oven for 13 to 15 minutes. I don't have a pizza, what even is it called? Like a plate, whatever. So I just use a regular tray, and I make the pizzas really small because it needs to fit the tray. Sometimes I even make like rectangular pizzas. It doesn't really matter. I just do what I do with what I have. Let's move on to the dessert part of my baking that week. This week, if I want to say. I am to a bowl adding all the dry ingredients, it called for a little bit of all-purpose flour and a mixture of bread flour together, but I just used bread flour all together. So basically I did 3/4 cup and a cup plus 2 teaspoons of bread flour, a teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. And in a bowl here I am adding an egg, 1/2 cup of starter, and a teaspoon of vanilla extract, and mixing that and into the bowl that goes in the stand mixer. I'm using the paddle attachment, I believe is what it's called. I added 8 tablespoons of butter, 1/2 cup of brown sugar, and 1/2 cup of white sugar, and then mix that. And then after that I added 1.5 cups of chocolate chips. I then add all the dry ingredients that I've mixed in a bowl earlier, and then the wet ingredients that I mixed in a separate bowl. And I just let, again, the stand mixer just work for me. I use my spatula and take all of that off the paddle attachment, and I roll all the cookie doughs into a bowl. It makes 12 cookies, place them on a parchment paper, and I let this ferment in my fridge for 24 hours because honestly 24 hours is the best. The recipe says 24 hours is best, and I've made it 8 hours before, but I do agree that 24 hours is the best. And then the next day, here I am just re-rolling them into sort of like a nicer ball so that when they bake, they come into a nice shape. And of course, Lavender was helping me out. She had so much fun rolling this into balls. These are honestly the yummiest sourdough chocolate chip cookies I've ever had. Maybe it's because it's the only recipe I've tried, but I think the amount of reviews that this recipe got honestly probably speaks for itself. So the next day I am making sourdough bread. I've used this recipe for so long now. I've tried lots of different recipes. This is the only one that seems to be yummy to me, and I don't know. But anyway, to this I add 520 grams of flour, 2 teaspoons of salt, 385 grams of water, 90 grams of starter. I mix it up, and then 15 minutes later I do a little bit of a stretch and fold, and then I put it away for another 15 minutes, and then I do a second set of stretch and fold, and then I cover that and obviously put it in my warm spot and let it rise and ferment overnight. And the next day, you can see it has risen. I am just adding a little bit of rice flour and normal flour onto my banneton prior to me stretching the sourdough. So here I am stretching it and folding it over onto itself. So you do that twice. And here I've folded it and I shaped it into the dough and put it on my banneton, and I let that chill in the fridge for about an hour. And within that hour I go ahead and heat up the Dutch oven. In the oven I use the highest temperature, which is 250 for this oven. And once my sourdough is ready, I just score it. I think that day I kind of failed a little bit, but the bread ended up looking good after it. It just looks a little sloppy when it's on the paper. I don't know why it does this still. All the recipes does not do this for me. It's this specific recipe. I have tried so many things. I've tried chilling it for so long. I've tried not letting it proof for too long. I've tried letting it proof for too long. There's just, I don't know. It comes out looking good. It comes out edible, and that's all that matters. So the next day I wanted to make sourdough tortillas for our dinner. I think this either was the morning or the night before, but to that I added a cup of sourdough starter, 3/4 cups of water, a 1/4 cup of olive oil, and a 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and then of course 3 cups of flour. I always just use my bread flour or baker's flour, whatever you call it. I again let the stand mixer do the kneading for me, and then I place it in this bowl with a little bit of olive oil, and I cover it with my beeswax wrap for 12 hours. You could do it for longer than this. I just remembered when this was on my counter rising overnight, Lavender got her learning tower and got a hold of the everything but bagel or something, everything seasoning, whatever, for the bagel. And she tipped it into the bowl. So our tortillas had all the seasoning from the bagel in it. I did take some off. I took as much as I can off. You probably won't be able to notice, but I was able to notice it when I saw all those black dots on my dough earlier. I divided the dough into 12 equal parts and I rolled each bowl of dough out on the counter with a little bit of flour on it, about 1/4 of an inch of thickness. I then fry them up in my pan. I would have done it on a cast iron, but at this point I did not own one yet. I do now, but at this point I didn't. Anyway, we used those tortillas that night. It was so yum. We made some mince and beans, some guacamole with what we had. We didn't have much for the guacamole, so we just used what we had, and it was, I think everybody loved that dinner. I'm looking at this now and I'm actually getting hungry. So the next thing I did was a sourdough sandwich bread. I love this bread. I am actually wanting to make more of this again. I just haven't got the timing right because of newborn and just being tired and everything. So anyway, to this, in my stand mixer bowl, I added 1/2 cup of butter, 2 tablespoons of honey, a tablespoon of salt, a cup of starter, 2.5 cups water, and 8 cups of flour. But I think in this video I only added half of those because this recipe makes 2 loaves. But I think in this video I only made 1. I'm not quite sure, but so if you want to only make 1 sandwich bread, then just half the recipe, which is what I did. So again, I let the stand mixer do the work for me, and I allow that to rise overnight in my warm spot near my oven. 'I then shape the dough by rolling it into like a flat rectangle and then rolling it up and putting it into my loaf pan, which I buttered as you saw earlier. I let that rise one more time at room temperature for 2 to 4 hours, or like honestly whenever it's doubled. I think it took 2 hours here on top of my stove, and the oven was running around 120 degrees Celsius that day. That's why it probably rose really quickly. To that, I am egg washing it so that it's got a good, nice crust. "45 minutes later, here is the sandwich bread. This is So yum, so soft. I'm really hungry just looking at it right now. We really enjoyed the toast that we had. Like, we made cheese toasties with this bread and they were all so yum. I even made French toast with this bread. Oh, it's so good. Anyway, I'm just cutting that so I could put it in the freezer or put it away, and it's already cut when I need some bread. The next morning, I am making, I think this is the first time I made it actually. I'm making sourdough Dutch baby pancake. To that, I added 6 eggs, a cup of starter, 1/3 cup of milk, a half teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of vanilla, 2 tablespoons of maple syrup, and 6 tablespoons of butter. And in my Dutch oven, I used my Dutch oven because, like I said, I didn't have cast iron yet. In my Dutch oven, I just fried up some apple and added some cinnamon to that so that I could add it with the Dutch baby. I just fried that up until the apples were soft enough, because Lavender was gonna be having this as well for breakfast. Once that was cooked and that was done, I added the 6 tablespoons of butter, and then I added the Dutch baby mixture, and then I popped it in the oven, I think for about 15 minutes. I was so impressed by this. I was like, how have I never heard of this before? Anyway, this is my last baking in this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I enjoyed making this video a lot, even though it took me so long to edit it. I mean, I was still pregnant in these videos. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next week.